"Can I touch him, Daddy?" she asked. The officer recognized the dog and went silent. A father and his little girl think they've just rescued a stray. But when a police officer locks eyes on the dog, everything stops, because this isn't just any animal. It's a ghost from the past, tied to a tragedy the family never truly understood. What starts as an innocent question turns into a dangerous mystery. One powerful man will do anything to keep buried. Suddenly, a grieving father is forced to confront the truth about his wife's death while protecting the daughter who means everything to him. Secrets are surfacing, enemies are closing in, and one loyal dog may be the only key to unlocking the nightmare. But if the truth comes out, will it set them free or destroy them forever? Your comments and presence here remind me why I tell these stories. If you still believe in the healing strength of love, truth, and quiet courage, then you're the reason this channel exists. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the rural Ohio road as Lyndon Carr's pickup truck slowed to approach the checkpoint. Orange cones funneled traffic into a single lane where two patrol cars waited with their lights silently flashing. In the passenger seat, 7-year-old Posey bounced with the kind of energy only children seem to possess, while Bishop, their German shepherd, sat alert in the back seat. "Why are the police stopping everyone, Daddy?" Posey asked, pressing her nose against the window. Lyndon's weathered hands gripped the steering wheel a bit tighter. "Just routine checks, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about." As they pulled up to the checkpoint, Officer Nate Ellerby approached the driver's side window. His clean-cut appearance and professional demeanor couldn't quite mask the tiredness in his eyes. "License and registration, please," he said, his voice carrying the practiced tone of someone who'd repeated the same phrase hundreds of times that day. Lyndon handed over his documents, watching as Ellerby reviewed them with mechanical efficiency. Everything seemed normal until Bishop shifted in the back seat, drawing the officer's attention. Ellerby's eyes widened slightly as they fixed on something. "Can I pet the doggy?" Posey called out cheerfully, already reaching toward the back seat. The question hung in the air as Ellerby stood frozen, his gaze locked on Bishop's ear, specifically on the small tattooed marking visible there. The change in his demeanor was sudden and stark, like someone who'd seen a ghost. Is that your dog?" Ellerby asked, his voice notably different from his earlier professional tone. "Yes," Lyndon replied carefully, noting the officer's strange reaction. "We rescued him a few months back." Ellerby swallowed hard, his face pale. Without another word, he thrust Lyndon's documents back through the window and stepped away from the truck. "You're free to go," he said quickly, already turning away. Lyndon drove through the checkpoint slowly, watching Ellerby's retreating figure in his rearview mirror. The officer stood rigid, staring after their truck with an unsettling intensity. "Why didn't he let me pet Bishop?" Posey asked, disappointment clear in her voice. "Sometimes police officers are very busy, honey," Lyndon answered, but unease had settled in his stomach like a cold stone. Later that evening, after tucking Posey into bed, Lyndon sat at his kitchen table, the house quiet except for Bishop's, steady breathing from his spot near the back door. The encounter at the checkpoint had stirred up memories he'd been trying to suppress. Thoughts of Sarah, his wife, and the accident that had taken her life 2 years ago. He could still hear Sheriff Rusk's condescending voice. "These things happen, Carr. Sometimes there's no one to blame." But the words had rung hollow then, and they still did now. Sarah had been too careful a driver, too familiar with that stretch of road. The way the investigation had been rushed, the missing witness statements, the convenient explanations. None of it had ever sat right with him. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of vehicles pulling up outside his workshop. Through the window, he could see the familiar outline of county sheriff's cruisers, their headlights cutting through the growing darkness. Bishop raised his head, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Heavy boots crunched on gravel, and then came the sharp rap of knuckles on his door. Lyndon opened it to find 3 deputies on his porch, with Sheriff Doyle Rusk's bulk filling the doorframe. "Evening, Carr," Rusk said, his jovial tone at odds with the cold look in his eyes. "Seems we've got ourselves a situation here. That dog you've been keeping? Turns out it's stolen county property. We'll need to take it back." Lyndon felt his jaw tighten. "Bishop's not stolen. We adopted him legally through the shelter. Papers can be faked," Rusk said smoothly. "That animal's a police K-9 and it belongs to the department. Hand him over and we'll forget this whole thing happened." Behind Lyndon, Bishop's growl grew, louder. The dog's presence felt protective rather than threatening, and something in Lyndon's gut told him that letting Bishop go would be a terrible mistake. "No," Lyndon said firmly, squaring his shoulders. "If there's been a mistake, we can sort it out properly tomorrow, through the proper channels." Sheriff Rusk's false smile fell away. "Don't make this difficult, Carr. You really want to cause trouble over a dog?" The threat in those words was clear, but Lyndon thought of Officer Ellerby's reaction at the checkpoint, of all the questions surrounding Sarah's death, of the way Bishop had become such a crucial part of their family. This wasn't just about a dog. Something deeper was at play here. "If you want Bishop, you'll need to come back with a court order," Lyndon said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Good night, Sheriff." Before Rusk could respond, Lyndon closed the door firmly and locked it. Through the window, he watched as the sheriff's face darkened with anger. The deputies stood uncertain until Rusk barked an order, and they retreated to their vehicles. As the cruisers pulled away, Lyndon knelt beside Bishop, running his hand over the dog's scarred ear and the mysterious tattoo that had triggered such a strong reaction in Officer Ellerby. Bishop leaned into his touch, warm and solid and alive. "What secrets are you carrying, boy?" Lyndon whispered, knowing that somehow the answer to that question might change everything. The autumn night settled over the small Ohio town like a heavy blanket, bringing with it a chill that made Lyndon pull his work jacket tighter as he locked up his auto glass shop. Bishop stood vigilant beside him, ears perked at every sound in the darkness. The day's confrontation at the checkpoint had left Lyndon unsettled, his mind churning with questions he couldn't answer. A car's headlights swept across the building's facade, and Lyndon tensed. Bishop let out a low growl but didn't move from his position. The vehicle pulled into the empty lot, its engine cutting off. In the dim glow of the security light, Lyndon recognized Officer Nate Ellerby stepping out, now in civilian clothes. "Mr. Carr," Nate called out softly, hands visible at his sides in a deliberate gesture of peace. "I need to talk to you. About Bishop." Lyndon's hand instinctively dropped to Bishop's head, feeling the dog's muscles coiled beneath his palm. "Seems like everyone wants to talk about my dog today." "He's not just any dog," Nate said, taking a careful step forward. His eyes darted to the shadows between buildings. "And that checkpoint today wasn't routine. They're looking for him." "Why?" Lyndon's voice carried an edge of steel. Nate ran a hand through his hair, his professional demeanor cracking to reveal genuine anxiety. "Because Bishop shouldn't be alive. He was a police K-9, one of our best. There was a fire at the county kennels 2 years ago. They said all the dogs were lost." Bishop's ears twitched at Nate's voice, and something in his posture changed. Recognition flickered in the dog's eyes. "That's impossible," Lyndon said, but even as the words left his mouth, pieces began falling into place. Bishop's advanced training, his mysterious tattoo, the way he responded to certain commands Lyndon had never taught him. "I worked with his handler," Nate continued, voice dropping lower. "Jake Martinez, good cop, asked too many questions about a crash he worked. Then the kennel fire happened." He paused, swallowing hard. "The same month your wife's accident occurred. The words hit Lyndon like a physical blow. His wife's death had been ruled an accident. A single vehicle crash on a clear night, no witnesses. but he'd never believed it. Sarah had been too careful a driver, too familiar with those roads. "What are you saying?" Lyndon's voice was barely above a whisper. "Bishop was there that night, at your wife's crash. He and Jake were first on scene. Jake filed his initial report, but it never made it to official records. 3 days later, the kennel burned. Jake was transferred out of state." Nate's eyes met Lyndon's. But someone wanted Bishop gone more than Jake. A dog who'd been trained to detect evidence. Who'd been at that scene? Who? Lyndon demanded, though part of him already knew the answer. "Benton Wycliffe," Nate said, the name hanging heavy in the night air. "His freight company owns half the county. His son Harlan was seen at Carson's bar that night drunk. Left around the same time as your wife. Lyndon's hands clenched into fists. Benton Wycliffe, the untouchable king of river freight, whose name graced hospital wings and whose influence reached into every corner of local government. The sheriff's department is in Wycliffe's pocket." Nate continued. "That's why they want Bishop. He's the last piece of evidence that survived, the last witness who can't be bought or threatened." Bishop pressed against Lyndon's leg as if sensing the weight of the moment. The dog's presence, warm and solid, anchored him as his world tilted on its axis. "Why are you telling me this?" Lyndon asked, studying the young officer's face. "Because Jake was my friend, because what happened to your wife wasn't right, and because I'm tired of watching Wycliffe and his money bury the truth." Nate glanced over his shoulder. "But I'm also telling you to be careful. These men, they don't play by any rules. They'll do whatever it takes to keep this quiet." The night seemed to press in closer, the shadows deeper. Everything Lyndon had suspected, every doubt that had gnawed at him since Sarah's death, suddenly crystallized into terrible clarity. Bishop wasn't just a rescued dog who had wandered into his life. He was a living link to the truth about his wife's death. "What happens now?" Lyndon asked, his mind already racing through implications and possibilities. "Keep Bishop close," Nate advised. "I'll do what I can from the inside, but be ready. They won't stop coming for him." He turned to leave, then paused. "And Mr. Carr, watch your daughter. These people, they'll use whatever leverage they can. Find." As Nate's car disappeared into the night, Lyndon stood in the empty lot, one hand still resting on Bishop's head. The dog looked up at him with knowing eyes, and Lyndon felt the weight of understanding settle over him. His instincts had been right all along. Sarah's death was no accident. Now, with Bishop by his side, he had a chance to uncover the truth. But that truth came with a price, and powerful men would do anything to keep it hidden. Greer Malloy's kitchen was a warm sanctuary against the growing darkness outside. Steam rose from 3 mugs of coffee on her worn oak table as she listened, intently to Lyndon recounting Officer Ellerby's late-night revelation. Bishop lay at their feet, his scarred ear twitching occasionally at distant sounds. "A police K-9, Greer said softly, her nurse's hands wrapped around her mug. "And they tried to cover up that he survived the fire." Her eyes, sharp from years of assessing emergencies, studied Lyndon's face. "You think this connects to Sarah's crash?" Lyndon ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion evident in every movement. "I don't know what to think anymore. But Bishop..." He glanced down at the German shepherd. "He was there, Greer. He might be the only witness left." "Then we need to know what he remembers," Greer said decisively. She stood, already reaching for her jacket. "Dogs don't forget scents. If Bishop was there that night, he'll show us." The drive to the crash site was tense, with anticipation. Greer's SUV wound through the back roads, headlights cutting through the darkness. Bishop sat alert in the back seat, his nose pressed against the window as familiar territory passed by. When they pulled onto the gravel shoulder near where Sarah's car had supposedly skidded out, the quarry's chain-link fence loomed like a dark wall against the star-filled sky. Lyndon's hands shook slightly as he clipped the leash to Bishop's collar. "You don't have to do this," Greer said gently, standing close enough that her shoulder brushed his arm in silent support. Yes, I do. Lyndon's voice was rough with emotion. Sarah deserves the truth. The moment Bishop's paws hit the ground, his demeanor changed. The German shepherd's nose dropped to the earth, taking in scents that had lingered for months beneath, layers of rain and dust. His powerful body tensed, and suddenly he was pulling forward with purpose, but not toward the supposed crash site. Bishop led them along the fence line, past where Sarah's car had been found, straight toward the quarries. Maintenance entrance, he whined, pawing at the padlocked gate, his behavior growing more agitated. My God, Greer breathed, her flashlight beam highlighting Bishop's intense focus. Lyndon, this isn't where they said the crash happened at all. Lyndon felt ice form in his stomach. The official report had claimed Sarah lost control on a curve, but Bishop was telling a different story entirely, one that led directly to Wycliffe's quarry operations. She was forced off the road, he said, the truth he'd suspected for months finally crystallizing. Right here, where no one would see. Before Greer could respond, patrol car lights flooded the area with harsh blue and red. Sheriff Rusk's massive frame emerged from the vehicle, his face twisted with barely contained rage. Well, Rusk drawled, hand resting meaningfully on his holstered weapon. Trespassing on private property, tampering with an active investigation, and in possession of stolen police property. He jerked his chin toward Bishop, who had moved protectively in front of Lyndon and Greer. Bishop's my dog, Lyndon stated firmly, though his heart was hammering. And we're on public land. Not anymore, you're not. Rusk's smile was cold as he produced a pair of handcuffs. Mr. Carr, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice, and that animal is being impounded as evidence. Greer stepped forward, her voice steady despite her obvious fear. On what grounds, Sheriff? You need probable cause. Ma'am, I suggest you step back unless you want to join your friend here. Rusk's deputies were already moving to flank them. That dog is county property, reported destroyed in a fire 6 months ago. Makes me wonder what else Mr. Carr here might be hiding. As the deputies approached, Bishop's growl rumbled deep in his chest. But Lyndon knew he couldn't risk the dog being hurt, or worse. Bishop, stay, he commanded firmly, even as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Greer, take him home, please. I'll call Jerry Thompson, Greer promised, naming the local defense attorney as she took Bishop's leash. Her eyes met Lyndon's, conveying what she couldn't say aloud with the sheriff present. She wouldn't let this go. They were too close to, the truth now. Lyndon watched through the patrol car's back window as Greer led Bishop away, the dog's reluctance evident in every step. They'd proven what he'd suspected all along. Sarah's death was no accident. But now he had to wonder, how many others knew the truth? And how far would they go to keep it buried? The patrol car pulled away, gravel crunching under its tires. In the darkness, the quarry stood silent, its secrets still held tight behind locked gates and years of carefully constructed lies. But for the first time since Sarah's death, Lyndon felt something beyond grief, purpose. Bishop had shown them the truth was there, waiting to be uncovered. Now he just had to stay alive long enough to expose it. Nate Ellerby's hands shook as he pulled up the database records on his work computer. The station was quiet at this late hour, with only the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead. His heart pounded as he typed in Bishop's tattoo number, dreading what he might find, but knowing he had to know the truth. The screen flickered, and there it was, Bishop's complete service record. Nate's breath caught as he scrolled through the dates. There, clear as day, was proof that Bishop had been present during the initial investigation of Sarah Carr's crash. The K9 unit logs showed him working the scene with his original handler. Dear God, Nate whispered, quickly saving the files to a flash drive. This was the evidence they needed, proof that Bishop hadn't died in that kennel fire months before like they'd claimed. He had been alive and working cases, including Sarah's death. Across town, Greer Malloy was already in motion. She'd gotten the call about Lyndon's arrest and Bishop's impending euthanasia order, and she wasn't about to let either of them down. Her practical nurse's shoes squeaked against the linoleum as she strode into the county jail's front office, withdrawal slip from her savings account in hand. "I'm here to post bail for Lyndon Carr," she announced firmly to the desk sergeant. Years of handling difficult situations in the ER had given her voice a quiet authority that most people responded to instinctively. While the paperwork was being processed, she made her way to the animal control facility where they were holding Bishop. Her medical credentials and natural air of belonging got her through the door without question. She found Bishop in a back kennel, his intelligent eyes lighting up at the sight of a familiar face. "Come on, boy," she whispered, clipping a leash to his collar. "We're getting you out of here before Rusk can follow through on that euthanasia order." Within an hour, she had both Lyndon and Bishop safely settled in her kitchen. Lyndon's face was drawn with exhaustion and worry as he sat at her table, one hand buried in Bishop's fur as if afraid to let go. "Thank you," he said hoarsely. "I don't know how to repay you for the bail money." "Don't even think about it," Greer replied, setting a mug of coffee in front of him. "What matters is keeping you both safe while we figure this out. A soft knock at the back door made them all tense, but it was only Nate, clutching a flash drive like it was made of gold. "You need to see this," he said, pulling out his laptop. "I found Bishop's records, the ones they tried to erase. He was there, Lyndon. He was at Sarah's crash site that night." Lyndon's hand tightened in Bishop's fur as they watched Nate pull up the files. The German shepherd pressed closer to his side, offering silent support as they viewed the damning evidence. "This proves they lied about Bishop dying in that fire," Nate explained. "And it puts him at the scene of Sarah's crash when they were supposedly investigating it as an accident." "But why?" Greer asked, her nurse's mind naturally seeking the logical progression. "Why cover up Bishop's survival? Unless what?" "He found that Knight wasn't supposed to be found," Lyndon finished quietly. For the first time since Sarah's death, he felt something other than helpless grief. A spark of determination flickered to life inside him. "We need more," he said, looking between Nate and Greer. "This proves they lied about Bishop, but we need concrete evidence linking everything together. The crash, the cover-up, all of it." Greer nodded, her practical nature already planning ahead. "We'll need to be careful. Rusk isn't going to stop coming after Bishop now that he knows we have him back." "I can help," Nate offered, though his voice wavered slightly. "But we have to be smart about this. These people, they'll do whatever it takes to keep their secrets buried." Bishop lifted his head, looking between the three humans with steady eyes. His scarred ear twitched as if picking up distant echoes of that night. At the crash site, whatever he had discovered then, whatever truth had been hidden away, he was their key to uncovering it all. Lyndon felt an unfamiliar sensation expanding in his chest. Hope, mixed with a new sense of purpose. For years, he'd been drowning in grief, unable to prove his suspicions about Sarah's death. Now, with Bishop returned to him and allies at his side, he finally had a chance to uncover the truth. "We stick together," Greer said firmly, reaching across the table to squeeze Lyndon's hand. "Whatever comes next, we face it as a team." The makeshift alliance formed in her kitchen that night was fragile, built on desperation and shared risk. But as they began planning their next moves, Lyndon realized it was also built on something stronger. A shared commitment to exposing the truth, no matter the cost. Bishop pressed his warm weight against Lyndon's leg, a solid reminder that he wasn't alone anymore. Whatever secrets lay buried in the past, they would uncover them together. The early morning mist hung heavy over the quarry as Lyndon's tow truck rumbled down the access road, its headlights cutting through the gray dawn. Bishop sat alert in the passenger seat, his scarred ear twitching at every sound. In the rearview mirror, Lyndon could see Greer following in her car, the faithful nurse having insisted on coming along after bailing him out. The quarry walls rose like ancient sentinels around them as Lyndon parked near the water's edge. His hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel as he cut the engine. This place had haunted his dreams for 2 years, the site where his wife Sarah had supposedly lost control and crashed. "Okay, boy," Lyndon said softly as he opened the door. "Show us what you know." Bishop leapt out, his nose immediately going to the ground. The German shepherd moved with purpose, following an invisible trail that only he could detect. Lyndon and Greer followed close behind as the dog led them along the quarry's edge. "He's definitely onto something," Greer observed, her voice barely above a whisper in the still morning air. Bishop stopped at a section of the quarry wall where the rock sloped down to create a natural ramp into the water. His tail went rigid, and he gave a low whine, pawing at the ground. Lyndon's heart began to race. "This isn't where they said the accident happened. The police report showed it was half a mile down, at the sharp turn." Could this be where? Greer didn't finish the thought. With shaking hands, Lyndon retrieved the heavy-duty spotlight from his truck. The beam cut through the murky water, and there, about 15 feet down, he caught a glint of metal. "Oh my God," he breathed. "There's something down there." The next hour passed in a blur of focused activity. Lyndon had worked hundreds of vehicle recoveries over the years, but never one that made his heart pound like this. He positioned the tow truck carefully, extending the boom out over the water. Greer helped him suit up in his wet gear while Bishop watched intently from the shore. The water was bone-chillingly cold as Lyndon descended. Visibility was poor, but his trained hands found purchase on what was unmistakably a car roof. Working by touch, he secured the cables, each movement deliberate and precise despite his racing thoughts. When the winch began to pull, the water churned and roiled. Slowly, terribly, a vehicle emerged from the depths. Water cascaded from its rusted frame as it broke the surface. Lyndon's breath caught in his throat. It was a silver Subaru Outback, the same model as Sarah's. The license plate confirmed his worst fears. This was his wife's car. "Lyndon!" Greer's voice cracked as she stepped forward to steady him. But Lyndon was already moving, his hands shaking as he examined the vehicle. The driver's side showed massive impact damage, not from a crash, but from industrial equipment. The metal was crushed inward in a pattern he recognized from his years working with heavy machinery. "This wasn't an accident," he said, his voice hollow. "Someone used equipment to push her in. They murdered her." Bishop whined and scratched at the rear passenger door. Lyndon wrenched it open, sending a cascade of silty water onto the ground. Inside, preserved in the sealed vehicle, lay Sarah's phone in a waterproof case, the one he'd given her for Christmas. Next to it glinted something that made his blood run cold. A Wycliffe Industries executive security badge. With trembling fingers, Lyndon picked up the badge. The photo showed Harlan Wycliffe's stern face, Benton Wycliffe's eldest son and head of operations. "He was here that night," Lyndon whispered. "Harlan Wycliffe was with my wife when she died." Greer moved closer, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. "We need to document everything. Photos, videos, the whole scene. They can't cover this up again." Lyndon nodded mechanically, his mind reeling as the pieces fell into place. Bishop's presence at the original investigation, the kennel fire that was supposed to have killed him, the desperate attempts to seize the dog. It all connected to this moment, to this terrible truth. His wife's death hadn't been an accident. She had been murdered, and one of the most powerful families in Ohio had covered it up. The evidence had been sitting here in the quarry for 2 years, waiting to be found. Bishop pressed against Lyndon's leg, offering silent comfort as tears began to roll down his face. The German shepherd's loyalty had led them here, had helped uncover the truth that had been hidden for so long. "We'll make this right, Sarah," Lyndon whispered, clutching the badge in his fist. "I promise you that." The morning sun broke through the mist, illuminating the scene in harsh clarity. The rusted car, the scattered evidence, and 3 figures standing witness to a truth that could no longer be denied. The time for grief was giving way to something else, a determination to see justice done, no matter the cost. The morning sun cast long shadows across Greer Malloy's kitchen table as she poured steaming coffee into 3 mugs. Lyndon sat with his shoulders hunched, still processing the devastating discovery at the quarry. Nate Ellerby paced near the window, regularly checking outside with the wariness of someone who knew too well how quickly things could go wrong. "We need to move fast," Nate said, finally settling into a chair. "Once Rusk realizes we've pulled that car out, he'll destroy anything that could connect back to the Wycliffes." Greer placed the mugs in front of them, her nurse's hands steady and, "Sure. I might have someone who can help. Remember that state trooper who helped with that pile-up on Interstate 76 last month? Marcus Wells. He's been vocal about Rusk's department overstepping their jurisdiction." Lyndon wrapped his hands around the warm mug, letting its heat ground him. "Can we trust him?" "He's got 20 years on the force and a spotless record," Greer said. "More importantly, he refused to play ball when Rusk tried pushing him around during that joint investigation." Nate nodded slowly, his face brightening with recognition. "Wells, yeah, I know him. Straight shooter. He could give us the official backing we need." "I'll make the call," Greer said, reaching for her phone. She stepped into the next room, her quiet voice carrying just enough for them to catch fragments of the conversation. Nate leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Listen, Lyndon, those kinds of operations always keep surveillance footage. Multiple copies, different locations, standard procedure." "Where would they store them?" Lyndon asked, hope flickering in his chest for the first time in days. "The main security office at the quarry would have a DVR system, but knowing Rusk, he'd want backup copies somewhere only his people could access." Nate's eyes narrowed in thought. "There's an old evidence storage room at the station. It's been decommissioned, officially. But Rusk's inner circle still uses it." Greer returned, a small smile playing at her lips. "Wells is in. He's been looking for a way to clean up this county for years. He'll meet us in an hour." They gathered their things quickly, moving with new purpose. Bishop followed at Lyndon's heels, the German shepherd's presence a constant reminder of why they couldn't give up. The dog's scarred ear and the secrets it represented had started them down this path. Now they had to see it through. State Trooper Marcus Wells turned out to be a tall, broad-shouldered man with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. They met in the parking lot of an abandoned garden center outside town, where Wells listened to their story without interruption. "I've suspected something was wrong in this county for a while," Wells said when they finished. "But this," he shook, his head, jaw tightening. "This is bigger than corruption. This is murder." "Will you help us?" Greer asked. Wells nodded grimly. "I'll coordinate with my superiors. We need to do this by the book. Make it stick. Deputy Ellerby, you said you know where they might keep surveillance footage?" "Yes, sir," Nate replied, standing straighter. "I can get us in. But we'll need a distraction to keep Rusk's people occupied." They spent the next hour planning, with Wells providing insights into proper evidence collection procedures. The state trooper's presence seemed to energize everyone, adding legitimate authority to their cause. That evening, while Wells orchestrated a traffic operation that drew most of the deputies to the county line, Nate led Lyndon and Greer to the station's back entrance. His access card still worked, something Rusk's people had overlooked in their haste to control the situation. The old evidence room was dusty and dim, filled with shelves of forgotten files and obsolete equipment. But behind a filing cabinet, just as Nate had suspected, they found a locked cabinet that looked notably newer than its surroundings. "Stand back," Nate whispered, using a key he'd quietly duplicated years ago. The cabinet opened with a soft click, revealing rows of hard drives and DVR recordings. Lyndon's hands shook as he helped Nate carefully document and bag the devices according to Wells's instructions. Greer kept watch at the door, her nurse's instincts for monitoring situations serving them well. "Got it," Nate breathed, holding up a drive labeled with dates matching the night of Sarah's crash. "This could be everything we need." They secured the evidence in Wells's official custody that night, following every procedure to maintain its integrity. As they watched the state trooper drive away with the recordings, a weight seemed to lift from their shoulders. Back at Greer's house, they allowed themselves to feel the first real hope since this all began. Bishop lay at Lyndon's feet, while Greer made fresh coffee and Nate reviewed his notes. "We're really doing this," Lyndon said quietly, still somewhat amazed. "We're actually fighting back." Greer reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Sarah deserves justice. And so do you." Nate looked up from his notebook, his face set with determination. "Wells will have his tech team analyze the footage tomorrow. If we're right about what's on there..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. They all knew what it would mean. The clock on Greer's wall ticked steadily, marking the moments of their first real victory. Outside, the stars shone clearly in the Ohio night, witnesses to a truth that could no longer stay buried. The late afternoon sun filtered through the workshop's dusty windows as Lyndon organized the evidence they'd gathered. His heart felt lighter than it had in years, despite the weight of what they'd discovered. Bishop lounged near the door, his ears perking up occasionally at passing cars. Greer had stayed behind to help sort through paperwork while Nate went to meet with Trooper Wells. The familiar scent of motor oil and glass cleaner filled the air as they worked, creating a false sense of normalcy. "Something's burning," Greer said suddenly, her head snapping up. Lyndon smelled it too, acrid and chemical. Then came the unmistakable crack of breaking glass, followed by a whoosh of igniting accelerant. Orange flames erupted across the workshop's rear wall, spreading with terrifying speed. "Get out!" Lyndon shouted, grabbing for Greer's arm. But the fire had already blocked the main exit. Thick black smoke rolled across the ceiling, making it hard to breathe. Bishop barked sharply, urgently. The German shepherd moved toward the side door, but flames were already licking up that wall, too. The heat became intense, making their skin prickle and their eyes water. "The back office?" Lyndon pulled Greer toward the small room where he kept his files. The smoke followed them, burning their throats. They could hear the main structure groaning as the fire ate through support beams. A thunderous crack split the air. Greer screamed as a burning beam crashed down, missing them by inches. The office door was jammed, warped by the heat. Lyndon slammed his shoulder against it once, twice, 3 times before it gave way. Bishop squeezed through first, leading them toward the small window. But as Lyndon helped boost Greer toward it, another beam gave way. This time, it caught Greer's leg, pinning her down. "I can't move!" she cried out, coughing violently in the thickening smoke. Lyndon's muscles strained as he tried to lift the beam. The wood was still burning, searing his hands, but he couldn't let go. Bishop whined, then wedged himself against the beam, adding his strength to Lyndon's effort. Together, man and dog managed to shift the burning timber just enough. Greer pulled herself free, her pants legs smoldering. Lyndon practically threw her through the window before scrambling out himself. Bishop leaped through last as the office ceiling collapsed behind them. They stumbled across the gravel lot, gasping, in the clean air. Distant sirens wailed, but Lyndon knew they'd arrived too late to save anything. His entire livelihood went up in flames before his eyes. "Your hands," Greer wheezed, her nurse's instincts kicking in despite her own injuries. Angry red blisters were already forming across Lyndon's palms. Before she could examine them properly, 2 police cruisers skidded into the lot. Sheriff Rusk emerged from one, his face a mask of false concern. "What a tragedy," he said, walking toward them. "Good thing you got out." His words dripped with menace rather than relief. Lyndon stepped in front of Greer protectively. Bishop growled low in his throat, hackles raised. "Where's Deputy Ellerby?" Rusk asked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Interesting timing. Him being arrested for evidence tampering just before this unfortunate accident. "You won't get away with this," Lyndon said, his voice rough from smoke. "Get away with what?" Rusk spread his hands innocently. "Accidents happen all the time. Just ask Benton Wycliffe. He's quite concerned about that dangerous animal you've been harboring. Says it's a threat to public safety." The fire trucks arrived then, but it was clear there would be nothing left to save. Everything they'd gathered, all their evidence, was gone. As paramedics insisted on checking Greer's leg and Lyndon's burns, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message chilled him more than the fire had. "The dog must be put down by morning, or next time the fire won't be at your workshop." BWW Lyndon looked at Bishop, who sat alertly at his feet, still guarding them despite everything. The dog had just helped save Greer's life. Now Benton Wycliffe wanted him dead, and the threat against Posey was clear. Through the smoke and chaos, Lyndon caught Greer's eye. She nodded slightly, understanding passing between them. They'd lost this round, but they weren't beaten yet. Somehow, they had to get Nate out of jail, protect Bishop, and find another way to expose the truth, all while staying alive themselves. The workshop continued to burn behind them, years of work reduced to ash and ember. But as Lyndon watched, his business crumbled, his resolve only hardened. Rusk and the Wycliffes had just shown how far they would go to keep their secrets buried. The question now was, how far would Lyndon go to uncover them? The evening after the workshop fire, exhaustion weighed heavily on Lyndon as he sat in Greer's kitchen. His bandaged hands throbbed where the burning beam had scorched them. Bishop lay at his feet, occasionally nudging his leg in silent support. Greer hung up her phone with a frustrated sigh. "That's the 3rd reporter who's turned us down. They're all saying the same thing. No one wants to touch anything involving the Wycliffes." Lyndon stared at his coffee, gone cold and untouched. "The state trooper," Wells called earlier, said he's backing out, claims his pension's on the line. Greer's voice held barely contained anger. "He apologized, but we're on our own." Lyndon finished the thought. They needed to move the evidence somewhere safer. With the workshop destroyed, keeping it at Greer's house wasn't an option. It would be the first place they'd look. They decided to transfer everything to a storage unit 2 towns over. The drive should have been simple. They took back roads, staying cautious. But halfway there, headlights blazed behind them, closing fast. Before Lyndon could react, the pursuing vehicle slammed into their rear bumper. The impact sent them fishtailing. Bishop barked a warning as another car appeared ahead, trying to box them in. Lyndon yanked the wheel hard, taking them off-road. The truck bounced violently over rough ground. A shot rang out, shattering their back window. Bishop lunged to protect Greer, catching a spray of glass across his flank. The German Shepherd yelped in pain but stayed positioned between her and the danger. Lyndon managed to lose their pursuers by cutting through an old logging trail, but the damage was done. When they finally stopped, Bishop's fur was matted with blood where the glass had cut him. "Let me see him," Greer said, her nurse's training taking over. She examined the wounds carefully while Lyndon held a flashlight. "The cuts aren't too deep, but they'll need cleaning." Back at her house, Greer tended to Bishop's injuries with gentle hands. The dog endured the antiseptic and bandaging stoically, only whimpering once when she removed a particularly deep shard of glass. Lyndon paced the kitchen, rage and helplessness warring inside him. "Maybe we should just—" His voice cracked. "Maybe we should stop, before someone gets killed." Greer looked up sharply. "You don't mean that, don't I? Look what's happened already. The workshop, Bishop hurt, Nate in jail. They're not going to stop, which is exactly why we can't." Greer finished securing Bishop's bandage. "Your wife deserves justice. Posey deserves to know the truth about her mother." The mention of his daughter hit home. Lyndon sank into a chair, remembering how young Posey had been when they lost her mother. How many questions remained unanswered? The phone rang, startling them both. It was a collect call from the county jail. "Nate." "Listen carefully," Nate said, when Lyndon accepted the charges. "I don't have much time. There's another copy of the surveillance footage. A backup drive." Lyndon's pulse quickened. "Where?" "The boathouse at Wycliffe's Lake property. The old caretaker kept duplicates of everything. Insurance, he called it. In a waterproof safe under the floorboards. Why didn't you tell us before?" "Wasn't sure it was still there. But I overheard Rusk and Harlan Wycliffe talking. They're worried about it. They don't know exactly where it is, but they know it exists." The line crackled with static. "They're planning to torch the boathouse tomorrow night, make it look like vandals. You have to get there first." "Nate," Lyndon started, but the call cut off. Greer had been listening. Her face was set with determination. "We have to try." Lyndon looked at Bishop, who had risen despite his injuries, tail wagging slightly as if sensing renewed purpose. The dog's steadfast loyalty, even when hurt, shamed his moment of weakness. "The lake property will be watched," he said, already thinking it through. "Getting in won't be easy. But it's our last chance," Greer reminded him. "Our only chance to prove what really happened to your wife." Lyndon reached down to stroke Bishop's head, careful to avoid the bandaged areas. The German shepherd leaned into his touch, offering the same unconditional support he'd shown since the day they found each other. "Okay," he said finally. "We'll need supplies. And a plan." They spent the next hour gathering what they'd need. Flashlights, tools, first aid supplies in case Bishop's wounds reopened. Greer sketched a rough map of the lake property based on what she remembered from community events held there years ago. The weight of what they were attempting settled over them like a heavy blanket. One final desperate chance to expose the truth. If they failed, there would be no more opportunities. But if they succeeded— Lyndon checked his watch. 10 hours until nightfall. 10 hours to figure out how to get past Wycliffe's security and find a hidden safe before everything went up in flames. Bishop limped over to the window, looking out into the darkness as if he already knew what was coming. His posture was alert, despite his injuries, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The storm clouds gathered ominously over the lake as Lyndon reviewed their desperate plan one final time. Rain pelted the windows of Greer's house while Bishop sat alert at his feet, sensing the tension in the room. "We'll draw Rusk to the old marina with a fake tip," Greer explained, spreading out a worn map on her kitchen table. "Meanwhile, you and Bishop hit the boathouse. The security system will be down during the storm. It always fails when there's lightning." Lyndon's hands trembled slightly as he checked his phone. Nate confirmed the drive is in Rusk's office inside. "Top drawer. Left side." Thunder cracked overhead, making them all jump. Bishop pressed closer to Lyndon's leg, offering silent support. The German shepherd's scarred ear twitched at each rumble. "Dad?" Posey's small voice came from the hallway. She stood in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "I don't like the thunder." Lyndon crossed to her, kneeling down. "Hey, sweetie, you're going to stay with Ms. Greer while Bishop and I run an errand, okay?" "But it's scary outside," Posey whispered, her eyes wide. "I know, baby. but sometimes we have to be brave even when things are scary. He hugged her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. They put their plan in motion as the storm intensified. Greer made the call that would send Rusk racing to the marina while Linden and Bishop crept through the rain toward the boathouse. The wind whipped across the lake, creating white-capped waves that crashed against the shore. What they didn't know was that Posey had slipped out after them, worried about her father and Bishop in the storm. She followed at a distance, her small form hidden by the darkness and rain. The boathouse loomed ahead, a hulking shadow against the turbulent sky. Lightning flashed, illuminating the empty parking lot. Linden picked the lock with trembling fingers while Bishop stood guard, rain plastering his fur to his muscular frame. They were halfway to Rusk's office when floodlights suddenly blazed to life. Linden's heart stopped as he heard the distinctive rumble of a forklift engine. "Well, well," Rusk's voice boomed through the cavernous space. "Looks like my anonymous tip wasn't so anonymous after all." The forklift emerged from the shadows, Rusk at the controls. His usually jovial face was twisted with malice as he maneuvered the machine to block their escape route. "Bishop, find Posey," Linden commanded, spotting his daughter's terrified face in the doorway. But before the dog could move, a security guard grabbed Posey roughly by the arm. "Daddy!" she screamed, struggling against the man's grip. "Let her go!" Linden's voice cracked with desperation. "You should have left well enough alone, Carr," Rusk growled, advancing with the forklift. The massive machine forced Linden and Bishop backward toward the water's edge. Some accidents are better left buried. Lightning split the sky as Bishop launched himself at the guard holding Posey. The German shepherd's training kicked in. He clamped down on the man's arm with precise pressure, forcing him to release the girl without causing serious injury. Posey broke free and ran to safety behind a stack of crates. Linden saw his chance. While Rusk was distracted by Bishop's attack, he sprinted to his truck parked outside. The engine roared to life as he gunned it straight toward the boathouse doors. The heavy-duty tow rig's winch cable whipped in the wind behind him. Rusk realized too late what was happening. Linden's truck slammed through the doors, the cable catching the forklift's frame with a metallic screech. With a sharp turn and burst of power, Linden used the truck's weight to pull. The forklift teetered, then toppled sideways into the churning inlet with Rusk still in the seat. "Posey!" Linden called out. "Come on, baby!" His daughter ran to him as Bishop herded her forward, all three piling into the truck's cab. Behind them, Rusk splashed and cursed as he fought his way out of the sinking forklift. But it was over. His radio crackled with reports of state police arriving at the marina, and backup was already on its way to the boathouse. Linden held Posey, close as they drove away through the storm. Bishop pressed protectively against them both. His daughter's small hands clutched his shirt, and he could feel her trembling. "It's okay now," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "We're all okay." Thunder rolled overhead, but this time Posey didn't flinch. She looked up at her father with trust in her eyes, then reached out to scratch Bishop's ear. The German shepherd responded with a gentle lick to her hand, his mission to protect his family accomplished. Through the pounding rain, state police vehicles swarmed the boathouse, their red and blue lights reflecting off the churning water. Deputy Marcus Chen, his hand shaking but his voice steady, played the recording he'd made on his phone during Rusk's panicked final orders. "Destroy everything in that office." Rusk's voice crackled through the speaker. "I don't care what Wycliffe says. Burn it all before they get here." The lead investigator, Agent Sarah Torres, nodded grimly as she listened. Her team had already secured the duplicate drive from Rusk's office, along with stacks of incriminating documents detailing years of corruption. "This matches perfectly with the evidence we found," she said, closing her notebook. "The conspiracy goes deep. Falsified accident reports, witness intimidation, destruction of evidence, and it all leads straight to the top." Linden watched from beneath the shelter of his truck's canopy as officers led Sheriff Rusk away in handcuffs. The man's usual swagger was gone, replaced by a defeated slump to his shoulders. Nearby, Bishop pressed close against Posey's leg, his fur still damp from their ordeal at the docks. "Daddy, is it really over?" Posey whispered, her small hand finding Lyndon's. "Yes, sweetheart, it's really over." Within hours, the investigation expanded to Wycliffe Industries. Benton Wycliffe was arrested at his estate, his carefully crafted image of respectability crumbling as evidence mounted of his role in covering up his son Harlan's involvement in the crash that killed Lyndon's wife. The following weeks passed in a blur of depositions and court appearances. The truth emerged piece by piece. How Harlan Wycliffe had been driving drunk that night, how he'd forced Lyndon's wife off the road, how his father had orchestrated an elaborate cover-up including the attempted destruction of Bishop, the one witness who could never be bought or threatened into silence. 2 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Lyndon stood before his wife's grave. The polished stone reflected the early sunlight, and fresh flowers brightened the morning shadows. Beside him, Greer held Posey's hand, while Bishop lay contentedly at their feet, his scarred ear twitching occasionally at passing sounds. "I wish Mom could see us now," Posey said softly, leaning against Greer's side. The gesture warmed Lyndon's heart. Over the past months, Greer had become such a natural part of their lives, filling their home with warmth and understanding. "She does, honey," Greer assured her, smoothing Posey's hair. "And she'd be so proud of how brave you've been." Lyndon knelt down to straighten the flowers, his fingers tracing the familiar letters of his wife's name. But for the first time since her death, the crushing weight of grief had lifted. In its place was something gentler, a bittersweet gratitude for the love they'd shared and an unexpected hope for the future. Bishop, now officially retired from service and legally theirs, thumped his tail against the grass. His role in uncovering the truth had earned him commendations from the state police. Though he seemed most pleased by the extra treats Posey snuck him and his permanent place on the living room couch. "You know," Lyndon said, standing to rejoin, "Greer and Posey. I spent so long looking backward trying to make sense of what happened, but now—" He paused, looking at the family they'd become, this unexpected blessing born from tragedy and triumph. "Now you're ready to look forward," Greer finished softly, her hand finding his. Posey skipped ahead of them as they walked back to the car, Bishop following faithfully at her heels. The morning sun painted long shadows across the cemetery grass, and a gentle breeze carried the promise of change. For the first time in years, Lyndon felt truly whole. His life was no longer defined by what he'd lost, but by what he'd found: justice for his wife, a deeper bond with his daughter, a brave and loving partner in Greer, and the unwavering loyalty of a remarkable dog who had helped them uncover the truth. As they drove home, Lyndon watched through the rearview mirror as Posey dozed against Bishop's side, the big shepherd maintaining his protective vigil even in these peaceful moments. Greer's hand rested comfortably on his knee, and the road ahead stretched clear and bright before them. The pain would never completely fade. Grief had taught him that much. But now it was woven into a larger tapestry of love, courage, and second chances. His wife's memory would always be honored, but no longer as a haunting reminder of injustice. Instead, it had become the foundation for building something new, a future filled with hope, family, and the quiet joy of everyday moments shared with those you love. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay.